Chapter 15. Defective. General Thrakar, a seasoned and formidable Drixarian commander, awaited the arrival of his new conscripts with a sense of anticipation mixed with indifference. Known for his rigorous and often ruthless leadership, General Thrakar had a notorious reputation for his harsh treatment of conscripts. His demands in battle were relentless, often resulting in high casualty rates. But more disturbing were the rumors of his macabre appetite for human eyes and organs, a gruesome predilection that added a layer of terror to his already fearsome persona. The usual procedure for receiving new conscripts involved picking them up directly from the moon, a process that General Thrakar had become accustomed to over his numerous campaigns. However, this time, the procedure was different. The new conscripts were being delivered to him in space, a deviation from the norm that Thrakar noted, but was ultimately indifferent to. His primary concern was replenishing his ranks with fresh soldiers, regardless of the delivery method. Docked at a designated rendezvous point in the cold expanse of space, a Nexusar ship awaited. Nexusars, acting as intermediaries in the transfer of conscripts, had decided against the usual pickup on the moon. This change in procedure was an attempt to conceal the methods used to harvest humans from Earth, a secret closely guarded by the Nexusar to maintain the facade of normalcy on the planet. As the Drixarian ship approached the Nexusar vessel, General Thrakar observed the preparations for the transfer. The docking process was smooth, a testament to the advanced technology that both races possessed. Once docked, the transfer of the 20,000 new human conscripts began. The conscripts, a diverse group hailing from various parts of Earth, found themselves in a surreal and terrifying situation. Contained within blue light containers, they were immobilized, able to move only their eyes. These containers, functioning like high-tech restraints, held them in a state of suspended animation, reducing them to mere cargo to be transported at the whim of their captors. The blue light emanating from these containers cast an eerie glow in the dimly lit cargo bay, creating a scene that was both otherworldly and chilling. The conscripts, each trapped within their own isolated space, could do nothing but watch helplessly as they were moved around the ship like pieces on a chessboard. Conscripts could see each other, their eyes meeting across the confined spaces, sharing silent looks of fear, confusion, and despair. The inability to communicate, to move, or to have any control over their situation added to the psychological torment of their predicament, for each one had chosen or selected, in the case of many, to take part in the voluntary departure program, only to find themselves in a worse psychological torture as they were ushered silently into the Drixarian ship. General Thrakar, overseeing the transfer, remained impassive. To him, these conscripts were merely tools, resources to be utilized in the never-ending conquests and battles that defined the Drixarian Empire's expansionist agenda. The lives and well-being of these individuals were of little concern to him, their value measured only by their utility in battle, and for some, their suitability to satisfy his darker cravings. Representing the Nexusar was Zalarian, a figure whose appearance was markedly different from the usual. His normally translucent form had taken on a grayish hue, his skin resembling the rough texture of a shark. His demeanor was tense, a stark contrast to the composed and authoritative figure he usually presented. Zalarian's purpose was clear. He was there to collect the latest shipment of Teradol, a potent drug derived from human adrenaline and other secretions produced during battle. It was a substance that the Nexusar craved, an addiction that had them bound to the Drixarians in a symbiotic and twisted relationship. General Thrakar, aware of Zalarian's desperation, decided to exert his power over the situation. "I will inspect the conscripts first," he declared, his voice echoing through the docking bay. "Only then will we proceed with the exchange." Zalarian, visibly sickly and trembling, could do nothing but wait, his dependence on Teradol evident in his deteriorating state. He watched helplessly as General Thrakar took his time, thoroughly inspecting the new conscripts. Each passing moment seemed to stretch into eternity for Zalarian, his body shaking more violently as withdrawal symptoms set in. Conscripts were lined up in rows, were unaware of the transaction taking place over their heads. They remained held motionless in the blue beam, in silence, their minds full of fear, confusion, and resignation. Finally, after a prolonged and deliberate delay, General Thrakar signaled his satisfaction with the inspection. He turned to his subordinates and nodded, and they brought forth a container of Teradol. Zalarian, his hands shaking uncontrollably, reached for the container with a desperate eagerness. He quickly administered a dose of the drug, his movements frantic and uncoordinated. Within seconds of taking Teradol, a remarkable transformation occurred. Zalarian's grayish, rough appearance began to fade, his body returning to its usual translucent state. His shaking subsided, and a sense of relief washed over his features. The drug's effect was almost immediate, restoring Zalarian to his typical composure. General Thrakar observed the transformation with a cold, detached interest. The exchange had been more than a simple trade of conscripts for Teradol. It was a demonstration of the Drixarians' power over the Nexuzar and their addiction. As the transaction concluded, the Nexuzar ship departed, and Zalarian, now stabilized, retreated into the depths of his vessel. The scene was a stark reminder of the complex and dark interdependencies that govern the relationships between the Draxarians, the Nexuzar, and humanity. In this vast and unforgiving universe, power, addiction, and survival were intertwined in a dance of manipulation and control. In the depths of General Thrakar's imposing Drixarian ship, the process of preparing the new batch of human conscripts for battle was underway. Meanwhile, Thrakar indulged in a more sinister ritual, one that highlighted his gruesome reputation. In the dimly lit dining chamber, Thrakar surveyed the line of immobilized humans, his eyes narrowing as he selected his victim. The chosen one was promptly taken away, leaving the rest in a state of terror, unsure of the fate that had befallen their fellow conscript. Later, a Drixarian cook, skilled in the preparation of such macabre meals, delivered the cooked human to General Thrakar. The dish was presented with a level of care and precision that contrasted starkly with its horrifying nature. Thrakar's eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger as he eyed the meal before him. As the cook stood back, Thrakar's fangs dripped with saliva in anticipation of the feast. With a grotesque semblance of delight, Thrakar popped one of the cooked human eyes into his mouth, savoring it with what passed for a Drixarian smile. To any onlooker, this expression would only serve to amplify his already terrifying appearance. He relished the second eye with equal gusto, treating them as delicacies. However, the mood quickly soured when he moved on to the heart. Biting into it, Thrakar immediately spat it out in disgust, berating the cook for what he perceived as a preparation error. "This is wrong! What have you done to it?" he barked angrily. The cook, clearly frightened, hurriedly reassured him. "My general, it must have been a bad human. I prepared it as I always do, thousands of times before." Unsatisfied and still seething with anger, Thrakar then tried the brain, a part he usually savored above all else. But to his shock, he gagged on it as if it were spoiled, an unthinkable occurrence for a being of his stature. Demanding another to be prepared, his tirade was interrupted by the arrival of his second-in-command. "General, we have arrived at our destination. The conscripts are nearly ready," the officer reported. This news slightly diverted Thrakar's attention from his culinary disappointment. His mood, still soured by the unexpected turn of events with his meal, carried over as he prepared to oversee the conscripts' deployment. The thought of a failed indulgence lingered in his mind, an irritation that compounded the usual severity of his demeanor. With the ship approaching the planet, the newly processed and programmed conscripts roamed aimlessly through the departure area as they awaited their first encounter under General Thrakar's command, unaware of the unsettling events that had just transpired, but fully cognizant of the harrowing experiences that awaited them. General Thrakar stood in the vast departure area, observing the new batch of 20,000 conscripts as they emerged from processing. Each conscript had just undergone the installation of their implants, a procedure that would integrate them into the Drixarian military system. However, as Thrakar listened to their conversations and tuned into their thoughts, he found himself perplexed and increasingly concerned. Unknown to him, this group of conscripts was unlike any he had encountered before. Many of them were mentally disturbed, clinically depressed, or suicidal, having chosen to end their lives by opting into the voluntary departure program. It was evident that this made for a poor and unstable group of soldiers. As General Thrakar ordered them to form up, chaos ensued. While some conscripts managed to follow the command, others behaved erratically. Several ran around laughing maniacally, while others screamed uncontrollably, their minds clearly unhinged. This was a far cry from the disciplined and responsive soldiers Thrakar was accustomed to commanding. Frustrated and seeking to impose order, General Thrakar accessed his holographic screen, and with a few flicks, activated the infamous trumpet sound. The conscripts who were behaving wildly exploded into bloody piles of flesh, a brutal but effective demonstration of the power and control he wielded. Usually, such a display was reserved for the battlefield and involved only a few conscripts as a lesson in obedience. But the sheer number and the disturbing behavior of these new conscripts necessitated a more drastic measure. After the gruesome display, General Thrakar addressed the remaining conscripts as many times before after such a display. This is what happens if you do not follow orders. When orders are given to attack, you attack. Shall I demonstrate further? He asked, a rhetorical question he had posed countless times before, always receiving a chorus of no in response. However, this time the response was chillingly different. A few conscripts responded with a yes, and one even shouted, "Do me, do me." General Thrakar was taken aback. What the hell is this? He thought, as he quickly eliminated those who had spoken up. With the departure area now quiet, the remaining conscripts stood in stunned silence, a mix of fear and confusion on their faces. General Thrakar, realizing the gravity of the situation and the potential instability of this group, gave the order to proceed through the portal to the planet below. As the new conscripts, still dazed and disoriented, moved through the portals, they were equipped with their helmets and weapons, standard gear for the grim tasks ahead. Each helmet clicked into place, forming a seamless bond with their suits, while weapons were distributed efficiently. A routine process. Meanwhile, General Thrakar, still lingering just behind the last conscripts, displayed a moment of curiosity. Using his sharp, talon-like nails, he delicately picked up a piece of the conscript's brain he had earlier destroyed. He brought it close, sniffing it cautiously before placing it in his mouth to taste. His reaction was immediate and disgusted. He spat it out with a look of revulsion. "Why does it taste like chemicals?" he muttered, perplexed and annoyed by the strange flavor. Shaking off his irritation, Thrakar proceeded to follow the last of the conscripts through the portal. He emerged on the planet's surface atop his floating command platform, expecting to see his troops neatly arranged in formation, ready to carry out his orders. Instead, he was met with a scene of utter chaos. To his shock and fury, the conscripts were in disarray, firing upon each other in a frenzied melee. The scene was one of uncontrolled violence and confusion, a stark contrast to the disciplined ranks he was accustomed to commanding. The sound of gunfire and the cries of the wounded filled the air as conscripts, driven by some unseen frenzy, turned their weapons against their comrades. Within minutes, the ground was littered with the bodies of the dead and dying, and the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and blood. General Thrakar watched in disbelief as half of his new conscripts were either killed, grievously wounded, or being transported away for vacation. The general's floating platform hovered above the carnage, his mind racing to comprehend the cause of this unprecedented breakdown in discipline. The conscripts, programmed for obedience and combat efficiency, were now engulfed in a self-destructive battle against each other, even before the cleansing of the planet had begun. General Thrakar, known for his merciless nature and strategic acumen, found himself facing a situation that defied explanation. The realization that something had gone terribly wrong with this batch of conscripts dawned on him, a malfunction or sabotage that had turned his soldiers into their own worst enemies. As the echoes of the last gunshots faded, Thrakar was left with the daunting task of addressing this disaster. His command, once unchallenged and absolute, now faced a crisis of unforeseen magnitude, one that threatened not only the success of their mission, but also his reputation as a formidable Draxarian general.